monitoring conflict has taught us one thing: that the aim of violence is never what it seems. Conflict is a long game where actors, causes, and costs are often ambiguous at the start and more nefarious at the end. Such is the case in the Bangsamoro. Causes emerge long after the violence is committed. Perpetrators are hidden in the shadows. The real costs are understated, and the actual victims unrecognized. We use metaphors like the cycle of violence and the conflict trap to portray an ending conflict. We draw conflict strings to demonstrate that violence may reignite. Such is the condition that prevents us from rejoicing when violence declines. Because peace is never the default mode, conflict is. Over the past 10 years, we saw traces of the same sort of violent actors with new names and deadlier motives. We witnessed resilient impunity and hostile prejudices stretched far and wide by revenge. It is a haunting reminder of the relentless yet forgotten war in Muslim Mindanao. In 2019, we reported from this site overlooking Lake Lanao and the devastation of the most affected area in Marawi. 5 years has passed since the deadly siege, yet people are still unable to resume their lives. The violence that befell the city continues to haunt not only Marawi but the whole Bangsamoro. To be sure, there is some consolation in the ebb and flow of conflict from 2011 to 2020. We are aware that violence started to rise in 2011, inundating the region in 2016 to 2017, before receding from 2018, but not at the same level 7 years earlier.
Nasa bagong kabanata na tayo, kaya ipakita natin sa lahat kung ano ang kayang gawin ng nagkakailang Bangsamoro.
In 2019, we warned about the exclusion and dissatisfaction of groups in the conflict-to-peace transition. The BOL does not cement the right to rule, and neither will the reference to one united Bangsamoro. The new government must prevent the reproduction of the same anxieties and fears that undermined previous regimes by avoiding decisions, policies, and processes that hamper its legitimacy. A socio-political military agreement is needed over the control and management of weapons. The normalization process and the planned decommissioning of combatants and weapons will have a negligible effect on the peace and security situation. Without a doubt, there is joy in the retirement of rebellion-related conflict. We are satisfied with the establishment of a new Bangsamoro authority and parliament with more powers and bigger resources. Though beset by uncertainty, hampered by discord, and delayed in important legislation, there are doubts if the political settlements will end wars in Mindanao. Hence, we return to the central question that peace builders and development workers consistently ask: why does violent conflict persist? 1. Because the analysis has overlooked a bigger and more important causal shift in violence. The polarization of identities, the erosion of tradition, the appeal of extremism, and the easier access to the instruments and bounties of war. There has been an explosion in identity-based conflicts over the past decade and the spread of deadly economies in guns and drugs. 2. It is clear that the conflict-to-peace transition enjoyed by former combatants have not had immediate spillover effects on other marginalized groups equally affected by half a century of war. Equal access has been curtailed on important issues such as land, justice, and jobs. Rebels and insurgents laid claim over vast tracts of lands that constricted the rights and privileges of indigenous groups. They now bear the brunt of attacks in Maguindanao. So have rival armed groups seeking the same benefits from normalization. 3. From as early as 2017, Conflict Alert has already noted the enduring and emerging threats to peace in the Bangsamoro are being escalated by multi-causal violence. Multi-causal incidents increased in proportion to the total number of incidents, from 19% of incidents in 2011 to 35% of the total number of incidents in 2020. A violence intensity index confirmed the surge in political and identity-based conflict, leading to high levels of death and displacement. Nowhere is the multi-causality of conflict as pronounced as in urban areas and the borderlands, as signified in conflict alerts heat maps. This is so because the population is concentrated in urban areas as well as their wealth, and hence attractive to predators. The heterogeneity of the population can also be a source of violent cleavages. Finally, there's a tendency among warring groups in Mindanao to engage in violent clashes within cities, even clan feuding and land disputes. Borderlands exhibit the same levels of violence comparable to cities. Violence in borderlands depended upon the availability and access to resources and the evolution of these areas. Four, multi-causal conflict plus the power of revenge to prolong episodes of violence has alerted few conflict specialists and even fewer peace builders into examining and cutting conflict strings. As a result, we saw great big wars in little places in the years 2015 and 2017, when we saw a deadly surge in violent extremism in the region. From the Pintakasi or free-for-all in Mamasapano to the siege of Marawi, individual and minute acts of violence were transformed into a full-blown war. 5. Political identity violence surged in 2017 with an explosion of extremist violence from new actors fomenting a clash of religious identities. These new set of actors emerged in 2016 and pledged allegiance to ISIS. They include the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters or BIFF in Maguindanao and North Cotabato, the Dawla Islamiyah in the Lanao provinces, and the Abu Sayyaf in Basilan and Sulu. VE groups would share the same space with another insurgent group, the Communist New People's Army or NPA. The significant entry of NPA forces inside the Bangsamoro was flagged in 2018, having been driven away from northern and southern Mindanao. 6. Moro clans have become significantly weaker and traditions under constant attack by both extremist Islam and the onslaught of the internet. Marawi became a defining event. Clans were unable to head off the capture of their youth. Instead, kinship ties became routes to recruitment and mobilization. 7. Conflict Alert has recorded an alarming upward trend in gender-based violence in the region, initially because of improved monitoring of incidences in the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, before numbers declined significantly in 2017. However, a return to high levels of violence was not flagged early enough to prevent a swift deterioration in the well-being of women and children in lockdown or quarantine conditions. Gender-related violence, including those that involve young girls, increased from March to May and from September to December of 2020, consistent with the hard lockdowns imposed at the beginning of the pandemic. For these and other reasons, the situation in the Bangsamoro today reflects the set of conditions found in the notion of a conflict trap. The ebb and flow of conflict in the past decade saw shifting spikes in vertical and horizontal conflict. Consequently, the intractable violence shaped the human development of the region.
Sana yung mga mahihirap dito matulungan po. Dahil sobrang krisis ngayon, di masyadong nakakalusot ang ayuda dito. Bihira lang po, ma'am. Kasi yung asawa ko po wala po dito. Sa ibang bansa po. Hindi na po masyadong nakakatulong kaya walang masyadong magandang trabaho doon.
Pangarap ko makapag-aral yung mga anak ko. Mabuti na kung makatapos, siyempre makapag-opisina. Pero kung hindi na makatapos, dahil sa mahirap kami, kahit makapagsalita lang, makapunta sa city, marunong na bumasa kung saan pumasok, okay na yun.
Yung mga kababaihan ngayon, pag walang-wala talaga yung mga babae, mas lalo silang hinahamak. Ako, hindi ko alam baka ito yung examine sa akin ng ala na marami akong anak. Kasi kung tinitingnan ko ang sarili ko, bakit naging ganito yung mga anak ko tapos wala akong may pakain? Bakit? Siguro kasama ito sa gustong ipasurvive sa akin ng kanila.
Tungkol sa aming sitwasyon sa ngayon, so medyo hindi naman sa peaceful. Wala na ba kaming karapatan na mamahala sa aming sariling pamayan? Kung aking isipin ang buong probinsya ng Maguindanao at saka probinsya ng Central Luzon, dito na lang kami ang patutubong laban dito sa South Luzon. Kaya sana ang BALM ibigyan nila sa amin yung bahagi namin. Kung baga sa isang manok. Kung kulang sa kanila yung katawan ng manok, kahit yung balahibo na lang, para may ano rin kami, may bahagi kami. Sana maabutan ko pa na may sarili kaming pamayanan. Hindi na para sa akin, ma'am, para sa mga huling kabataan namin. Sa lupa kami nang galing, sa lupa kami babalik.
People in Muslim Mindanao accumulated less capacities and enjoyed less opportunities to enjoy long, healthy, and creative lives than others across the country. The level in the region is only a third of the achievements in the National Capital Region and less than half of the average achievements across the country.
Malacanang releases the appointment papers of 76 out of 80 members of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority or BTA.
Another thing is clear. The political transition has shifted the foundations of the existing political settlement in the Bangsamoro, as well as the narrative.
I had to declare martial law in the Mindanao group of islands.
The imposition of martial law from 2017 to 2019 and the lockdowns from 2020 to 2021 must be credited for creating a peaceful interlude, however short-lived, at a delicate period when the Bangsamoro Transition Authority and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao was established. I'm here in the Eversan Complex in Barangay Sarmiento, Parang, Maguindanao, where the new Bangsamoro Regional Government is set to be built. Parang Maguindanao is strategic because it sits in the border area of North Cotabato, Lanao del Sur, and Maguindanao provinces. And historically, it was an integral part of the Maguindanao Sultanate during the Spanish period. The long years of war has left communities in the Bangsamoro among the poorest and least developed in the country. Bangsamoro rebel groups fought to transform the configuration of social, economic, and political power, and they won. The question now is, will the BARM secure lasting peace, development, and inclusion in the region? 3 steps are necessary and immediate. First, the scope of economic activity that entirely escapes the purview of the state is a strategic resource that must be placed under fiscal control. Second, the serious problems and the growing impasse in the implementation of the normalization aspects of the peace agreement need to be straightened out as soon as possible. Failures in the normalization process enable traditional leaders and political clans to resist ceding their firepower to the state and will pose a real danger to peace in the future. Third, immediate action on a land law must be undertaken to prevent further conflict. Years have gone since we delved into the nature and causes of conflict in the Bangsamoro. For many peace builders, expectations are still unfulfilled. Those anticipating the immediate absence of war will call this phase transitions interrupted because violent conflict still remains. Yet the more we encounter the same fluctuations of conflict trends in the Bangsamoro, the more we wonder if cyclical transitions are what we ought to expect. The declining violence we see today may be the only dip we'll see in a while. Political violence is on the rise due to revenge killings following the recent elections. These are signs of destabilization and extremist violence. So instead of expecting that the best is yet to come, Isn't it possible that what we are seeing now is the best that we can expect? These reversals illustrate conflict's long game, and in the Bangsamoro, it will take at least another generation for violence to yield and peace to reign, until the next cycle returns.